In fall 2014, another new entry in the huge Gundam franchise came out, celebrating the 35th anniversary of the original series. No, not that one, the other one, Gundam Reconguista in G? What was especially interesting about this was the return of Yahshua Katomina, the original creator of Mobile Suit Gundam, who hadn't directed a series in the franchise since Turn A in 1999. Along with Yoshida Kenichi as the character designer, providing a fresh and colourful art style, it definitely seemed like it would be something a little bit different. And something a bit different it was, but most of the reception didn't see it as the good kind of different. The show quickly gained a reputation for having a nonsensical plot where characters change on a dime and events happen for seemingly no reason. Having seen some of Tomino's previous works, this wasn't too hard to believe. Although there was a fair amount of defenders that claimed that a great show was there, it's just that not everything is neatly spelled out to you. That led to many a heated discussion online. "I have no idea what's going on," people would say. "All the answers are there, you just have to look for them," some would reply. "There's nothing there, this show is just nonsense," they would respond, a little louder. "Just because it isn't spoon-fed to you, fuck you! Fuck you!" And you can probably guess how it goes from there. So, who's right? Is the show just a disconnected mess? Or is it hidden genius? What does Reconguista even mean? What was Tomino trying to say? What is up with Gundam Reconguista? What is up with G-reco? Well, to be honest, yes, G-reco is a bit of a mess. Maybe a lot of a mess. Some of Tomino's typical weaknesses rear their ugly head again, too many battles that are unnecessary and needlessly convoluted, weird-ass dialogue that often feels like characters talking at each other rather than with, and an overwhelming amount of names and terminology. However, Tomino's strengths are also present. A full, interesting and deep setting full of life, being able to create a huge cast of characters while still making each one feel distinct and memorable, and also weirdly, surprisingly good slapstick. I was expecting this much going in, but just Tomino's typical habits aren't enough to explain everything about G-reco's oddities. To explain them, we might as well start at the setting. It is the Re-Guild century, hundreds of years after the Universal century, where there is now a religious taboo on advancing technologies to avoid conflict, and humanity's energy resource, photon batteries, are created and controlled by a distant space colony called the Venus Globe, and transported to them through the moon and a space elevator called the Capital Tower. However, trouble starts brewing as the country of Ameria starts a war aiming to stop this regulation of energy, and the Capital Tower starts raising an army of its own. Amidst all this, a mysterious girl falls to Earth along with a mobile suit. That all seems like a pretty straightforward setup for a story, right? Well, the problem is the show never gives you any clear exposition on the setting like I just did. Instead, you need to infer what the state of the world is, and who the various factions are, visually, or from small snippets of character dialogue. Now, I'm all for learning about the world through seeing it rather than having it explicitly told to us, and I think Tomino's style of world building works pretty well for this. But the issue is that G-reco doesn't wait for you to catch up. While you're still figuring out that initial premise, more and more factions and characters and terms are introduced. While it seems as though G-reco wants you to learn about its world organically, at the same time it assumes you already know what's going on and speeds forward. No one likes exposition dumps, but they do have a purpose. The scrolling text at the beginning of Star Wars is definitely not an elegant way of delivering exposition, but it means you can immediately dive into the film, understanding what's going on, who's who, and what the stakes are. Whereas G-reco throws you right into the thick of it, and just when you're finding your bearings, it piles more stuff on top. The erratic pacing doesn't help either, and suggests that maybe G-reco was intended for a longer runtime, maybe a full 50 episodes. However, from what I can find, G-reco was always meant to be 26 episodes, and Tomino admits the story was too big for that length, and so attempted to make it fit. But the evidence is still there, with characters and settings introduced for only a couple episodes before moving on, and a sense that we're missing a lot of stuff happening off screen. However, G-reco isn't as broken as one of Tomino's shows that actually was cut down from 50 episodes to just a movie, Gundam F91. Though, like F91, the underlying story is very solid, just obscured by structural issues. The characters especially come into conflict with these issues, since they're required to be in a certain place and act in a certain way for various scenes, but a lot of the connective tissue between these moments isn't there. This leads to sudden changes in allegiances, actions that don't make much sense until later in the show, and some characters just being completely sidelined. Still, the cast is a lot of fun, with plenty of personality to go around, and I found them all memorable. From the laid-back and positive main character Bellry, to self-proclaimed genius Nick Clem, and the resident Mask antagonist. Mask. So the show is needlessly complicated, and the characters seem to act irrationally. Is there no hope? Well, I still found a lot to enjoy in the show. It has a sense of humour and levity that's very refreshing. It has some goofy moments, such as all the key characters sharing an awkward elevator ride, everyone stopping their fighting to clean up space debris, and it makes sense to have toilets in mobile suits, right? How about some random music when you use them? But some major problems loom over all this. There isn't really any clear conclusions to the arcs that didn't just fall by the wayside, and a lot of technical stuff just gets no proper explanation. Like, how can the G-Self do this? Or this? Or pretty much anything it does now that I think about it. Though there is a view on G-reco that might put a different spin on things. From famous writer Gen Urobuchi, or is it infamous? No wait, he did Thunderbolt Fantasy, so that can't be right. As well as social commentator Uno Tsunehiro, who assert that G-reco is actually a story about the danger of stories. Narrative is very important in media reporting because it lets people see things through an understandable lens. But reality doesn't always have this neat distinction of stories, and so those narratives can sometimes be dangerous. The main conflicts in G-reco come from everyone following their own stories, or those pushed on them, whether there's much truth in those stories or not. The story that monopolization of photon batteries is wrong, the story that Capital Tower needs an army to defend itself, that the Kuntala are discriminated against and must prove themselves, that people living on Earth are all warmongering barbarians and must be put into place. The list goes on. However, the main characters of the series aren't so bothered about some grand cause like any of these. They just take things as they come and try to make the best of the situation. Urobuchi was so impressed by how this was handled that he considered it pushing the limits of storytelling. Reconguista of G made me Genki. Yes, that's an actual quote. I actually read this viewpoint before I watched G-reco and was skeptical, because, to be honest, it does just sound like some bullshitting to make a bad show good. But after watching the show, I do think it's a good reading, and G-reco benefits a lot from it. The main ship of the Megafauna is a fairly independent force that just looks to understand the causes of the war better and stop it, staying out of the many ideologies, vendettas, and misconceptions that compose the stories of all the various factions. The ending is fairly abrupt, and there isn't a particularly satisfying conclusion because, to be honest, there wasn't any large goal being aimed at in the first place. Bellry is perfectly happy to just continue going with the flow and making the most out of his life. There isn't any clear exposition because you need to form your own view on what's going on, just like reality. And I think Tomino avoided having a blatant message or moral to further reinforce this. Though, as much as I like this reading, it still doesn't cover all the issues. There's just a general lack of rhyme or reason in a lot of the episodes, regardless of how you look at it, to the point that Tomino has actually apologised, admitting that he fell behind in the storylines, which meant that some were lost and forgotten, and unfortunately this is quite noticeable. However, he was able to get back in control for a more focused last few episodes, and praises the art team for still being able to express so much despite his shortcomings. And oh man, the art. I could go on for ages about how great the show's aesthetics are, from the art style to the animation to the colourful character designs and futuristic creative mech designs. But I'm gonna let the clips I've been showing speak for themselves, and you can probably tell whether it's a style that appeals to you or not. I spent a lot of this video just trying to make sense of the weirdness and obscurity of G-reco, so I think it's pretty clear that this is a difficult show to recommend. I've also mentioned Tomino's own comments a lot because I think he's quite an unusual director, and despite the production troubles, he still has a strong vision in his old age. Maybe I'm biased since I'm a fan of Gundam, but I can't deny I really enjoyed G-reco. The experience of watching it is definitely very different from other shows, and you need to go in with the knowledge that not everything is articulated too clearly, some things may not seem to make much sense, and Tomino's trademark dialogue is going to be entertaining in its own way. Even understanding all that, and with Urobuchi's reading in mind, you still might find it lacking and long for a fleshed out 50 episode version. But G-reco is what it is, and that's 26 episodes of a very flawed but ambitious show with a lot of heart, that's very distinctive from any other one I've seen, and explores the dangers of stories themselves. Or is about regulation of energy resources, I don't know.
「私は人類の女性として健康」
Even understanding all that, and with Urobuchi's reading in mind, you still might find it lacking and long for a fleshed out 50 episode version. But G-reco is what it is, and that's 26 episodes of a very flawed but ambitious show with a lot of heart, that's very distinctive from any other one I've seen, and explores the dangers of stories themselves. Or is about regulation of energy resources, I don't know. G-reco is available for streaming on Hulu in the US, Animax in the UK, and Anime Lab in Australia. I'm assuming you're already familiar with the YouTube Tango, so you know to subscribe if you want more of my content without me having to say. If you want to know what is up with another series, you can check out my Concrete Revolution video. Or if you want something different, I rewatched Glass Up recently and made a video on whether that was a good idea or not. And you can also follow me on Twitter @CapryGalactic, where I spend way too much time posting random anime crap. Hope you enjoyed the video and see you next time.